Hi, I'm Matt Barry. I'm an independent filmmaker, and this is Low Budget Visions, where we celebrate personal DIY and independent cinema. I'm joined tonight by Sujewa Ekanayake, who I had the pleasure of finally meeting in person a few nights ago, and we enjoyed a great conversation and immediately made plans to come on here and have another conversation together. So, welcome, Sujewa.
Hello, Matt. Nice to be back on the show.
Yeah, I'd love to for you to take a minute just to kind of introduce yourself, reintroduce yourself to anybody who may not be familiar with your work.
Sure. My name is Sujewa Ekanayake. I live in Brooklyn, New York. Almost said Brooklyn, Maryland. I don't think that's a place. Um,
Well,
our
we have a
lives
Brooklyn here. We do have a Brooklyn, Maryland.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah.
Brooklyn, New York, the real Brooklyn.
Yeah.
I've made, at last count, around 10 movies. Most of those features, most of those fiction features, maybe six fiction features. One movie I shot called Brooklyn Fantastic never got edited, so I'm going to try to remake that. That was shot when people were still using uh, standard definition video, so it kind of got lost in the medium um, transfer from not transfer, but the changing from standard definition to high def. So now we're in 4K. So eventually, I'll have to go back and make a movie about pretty much remake that story and maybe use the old footage as maybe a movie within a movie. But my latest movie is called Cosmic Disco Detective Renee, as you can see the sign behind me. And that is doing well on YouTube right now, around 42,000 views and 1,500 or so likes. And Werewolf Ninja Philosopher, the movie that we're talking about now, sort of started my trend of making slow cinema type movies in New York. Werewolf was shot in about 1 month in 2017, and Matt can ask a bunch of questions about it, and I'll break down the making and release of the movie.
Sounds good. I'm really looking forward to this because actually I have to tell you, I think that The Werewolf Ninja Philosopher was the first of your movies that I saw, actually. I
Awesome.
now that I'm thinking about it, because you released these on YouTube a few years ago. Refresh my memory exactly when they appeared. Was it like
Uh, the,
2021?
yeah, these movies were on Vimeo VOD first.
Right.
And since you read my DIY filmmaker blog, you might have heard about it and checked out trailers there. And after theatrical in 2018 and 2019, after Vimeo VOD, I brought Werewolf Ninja Philosopher to YouTube maybe about a year or two ago, 22 or 2021, along with the movie after that, which is called The Secret Society for Slow Romance. So
Okay,
you
I
may
think
have
I
seen it.
watched both of those in pretty short order, but I think
Mhm.
Werewolf was first, and I was really struck by it because really, I don't know, I really liked just the whole sensibility of it, the sense of humor, the way it was shot. It was also, on a personal note, I think getting into some directions that I was also taking as I was starting to make feature films at that time. Some ways of thinking about how to do that, like structuring around the uh, B-roll footage, the kind of second unit footage you shot around New York. I mean, we can get into all that later, but
Sure.
suffice it to say, I really enjoyed it and followed your work. And then when Disco Detective Renee came out, I was following that release, and I saw that initially on through the Vimeo rental, and then was glad to see it again on YouTube. And I've watched it actually a couple times since it came there.
Awesome.
So
Big
yeah,
fan.
so to start with Werewolf, um, I have to ask where, I mean, where did the idea come from at the most basic level? What was the genesis of this project? It's very unique.
Sure. In 2017, I was working on a project for the critic filmmaker Matt Zoller Sites, always a tough name for me. And I was producing a puppet sci-fi movie for him. I was the producer on it, and he was writing and directing. And that movie had a lion character, sort of a humanoid lion, and that lion reminded me of a werewolf. And I was like, oh, I should make a werewolf philosopher movie um, because I like philosophy. And I did a movie in 2014 that was about a detective slash Philosopher in New York called, that movie was called Breakthrough Weekend. So later on, I worked with that idea and added the ninja aspect to it because one of my 2006 movies, one of my movies from 2006 called Date Number One had the Maryland, DC punk band Government Issues, John Stab Schroeder playing a ninja who goes on a blind date.
Hmm.
And that movie, I'd like to make it available free at some point when I can get to it on YouTube so that John's fans, GI fans can check it out. John passed away a few years ago. Um, but yeah, so that's how the first concept came together, Werewolf Ninja Philosopher, and to shoot it like a slow cinema type movie that came from like Stranger Than Paradise. Um, that style, black and white, minimalist style, also works really well for noir stories. I mean, that style is kind of a noir style based on how you light it.
You know, I want to ask you about that slow cinema approach because you said this was what 2017 that you shot this, and it was the first one that you had done in that style.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious what drew you to it, and I guess what inspired you to work in that style because I think there's been a lot of talk, a lot of discussion around slow cinema and related to that, things like the Paul Schrader's book about transcendental cinema. I think there's a lot of overlap there in the ideas. I was curious, how you sort of came to adopt that style for yourself. It seems like it's something you've continued to work in. I'm drawn to it myself. I'm just curious what it is, like what's in the air right now that slow cinema seems to have such currency.
I think that style has always been popular in the art house international scene because you can kind of say Stranger Than Paradise is a proto slow cinema movie. It wasn't labeled as such, but I mean Schrader was writing transcendental cinema much earlier, I think maybe 70s or 80s when that's when he wrote that book. But going back to the 70s, we have Chantal Ackerman, then we have Jarmusch in the 80s, then we have a whole bunch of art house filmmakers, Ozu in the 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, in Tokyo, in Japan, Tokyo Story, which Stranger Than Paradise mentions. So depicting real life unfolding at real life speed with a minimalist camera without doing crazy cuts, without moving the camera around too much. That has been around probably since the beginning of cinema. But because Hollywood went the Star Wars type route in the 80s, fast, full of action, not real life, um, art house movies and documentaries went the other way. And they started doing things where they show a whole lot of real life unfolding at the real life pace. And that became interesting to many people, uh, myself included. My favorite movie is probably Mystery Train by Jarmusch. And that happens at werewolf slash slow cinema type pace. Real life things happening in the real world at real speed, and the camera just hanging back and watching it.
Something I really like about it is how the style can be applied even to, like an absurd comedy in a way. I think it's something that can really have a very broad application to different types of film. And one of the things I found interesting about Werewolf Ninja Philosopher was how you were taking that style and applying it to a genre or a tone that you don't normally see. So I think that's a really interesting model.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, that have you seen Stranger Than Paradise?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So that has some absurd elements. It doesn't have a noir sci-fi, not sci-fi, but noir philosophical werewolf detective, which is an element from horror, I guess. But yeah, absurd comedy is my thing. So putting it in a slow cinema frame, noir frame, worked for that story really well. I mean, it freaked out some people. I mean, some people were really not into it. They came expecting a werewolf movie. got this art house thing, left the theater. I did 3 weeks of 1 week runs at Mazel's in Uptown in Harlem, and at what was the other movie theater downtown? Cinema Village for 1 week, and then Facets of Chicago booked it for 1 week. So I was at almost every one of those screenings, just doing Q&As and intros, hanging out.
Great. Yeah, as we said before, there's nothing like seeing it with an audience, seeing your movie with an audience. So I'm glad to
The
hear it.
movie looked really good at Facets at their screen.
Nice. I haven't been to Facets before, but that's good to hear.
You'll
It was
dig it.
nice screening for you. Yeah. Going back to the production of Werewolf, could you talk a little bit about both the casting process and also the scripting, and how much would you say was improvisatory? And by that I mean, I don't mean necessarily, I'm not talking about made up on the spot kind
Right.
of, but I'm talking about how much of it was did you discover in the process of structuring the film, of making the film?
It was almost 100% scripted, and scripted for a long time. I spent many months working on the script, like I do with all my movies, all my fiction features that are not some sort of an unusual project. All the ones that I finished and released fiction features have been scripted, heavily scripted, because I find working on scripts to be the best way to get the project ready to be filmed. So we didn't do any improvisational type stuff. Uh, there are a couple of funny makeout scenes with Werewolf and Sky, the girlfriend character played by Leah Lorray. That stuff we kind of how to stage that we kind of invented on the spot. But the dialogue was pre-written.
Okay. Could you talk a little bit about the structure with the B-roll footage of New York? I find that really interesting.
Yeah, we shot. How was the shot? I think while I was shooting one of the shooting days, we had a second person, the sound guy, who had his own little camera, and him and the werewolf went out and they shot some footage for me to use later. Then, whenever I would go out to the city to shoot actual scenes, I would also shoot some B-roll. And so this movie, I didn't shoot a ton of B-roll, unlike in the next two movies, but it was the start of trying to shoot. But oh, you know what? In this movie, we shot a lot of shots of the werewolf walking around the city.
Mhm.
And I thought I was just going to use a few, a little bit of that. But I liked the way that the shots looked in black and white so much. I wanted to use them as much as possible. So they were used to break up, from scene to scene transitions, dialogue scenes, scene to scene transitions. Also, I thought of it as that's how the werewolf does his work. He walks around in the city at night and thinks, tries to work out his cases. So we're just seeing him at work.
Yeah, it gives it a nice structure. I like it, and it really achieves a kind of a rhythm of its own, a pace of its own that way. I think there is a real unique rhythm to it that comes out of those scenes, and alternating them with the conversations. Excuse me. I think it's one of the ways that with feature filmmaking and being able to make, we can talk about this too, but the idea of being able to be prolific at making feature films. I think it's good to look at all these different techniques, like using B-roll, voiceover, you know limiting maybe some of the time spent on the more traditionally scripted narrative scenes, the dialogue scenes that can be more difficult to shoot in the sense of having the, scheduling actors and
Very
everything.
time consuming.
Yeah, exactly. So do you see that this approach is something? I mean, I see it as basically experimental, at least for me. Do you feel that this is something you're going to continue to work with in future projects as a way of structuring the films?
Depending on the movie. The next one, 53 Cases, is the working title,
Mhm.
where the two detectives introduce essentially 53 cases, a conversation about each case. And down the road, each one of those cases will be a full length feature. So, because of the heavy conversational nature and the large number of scenes we have to cover, or a large number of cases we have to cover, next one probably will not have a lot of a lot of shots of the city,
Mhm.
except I may do for the acting, for the staging the scenes, I may have the characters, myself and Aaliyah Lorray, playing the two detectives. We may be out and about in the city a lot, with clip-on mics, lav mics, I guess, and portable camera. There might be entire conversations happening where we're just hanging out at a park or taking an escalator, taking a train ride, and you hear the conversation. So yeah, depends on the movie. One thing about casting, the lead actor I found, Art Shriyantwari, who's a filmmaker and an actor. I found him maybe like a year prior. Maybe yeah, I had connected with him through Facebook. We met up once I got the script going. Then it took a long time for the script to get ready, and he was off to go do other things. So once the script was ready, I contacted him and said, "All right, we are about to shoot. If you want to do it, come do it. If not, I'll look at acting it myself." And we actually brought in another actor prior to that. That actor didn't work out. Um, I think some sort of a scheduling thing. Same thing with the Sky Bears's character. Another actress was brought in, and scheduling didn't work out because I mean it's a no budget project, so I had to squeeze in the filming whenever I could. So it's difficult to hold the people for certain dates. Um, then I think the night before shooting her scenes, we found Aaliyah. She was able to do it, and we went to Art's house in New Jersey and shot most of the scenes with Aaliyah and Art were shot in like one day, like 5 scenes, 6 scenes. I think that's all the scenes that she's in this movie.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm curious about that. If you could speak real quick to that about how many shooting days were involved and how it was worked out, how it broke down.
I think we shot the entire movie in about a month, and I think it was done over all the weekends of that month. I think this was uh, maybe September, October of 2017. And the movie was done by Halloween, which was October 31st, I think.
Oh, okay.
I had a screening planned for that day.
Nice.
So yeah, I think maybe like 4 to 8 or so days of actual filming.
It's good. It sounds like you were able to work quickly with that framework.
Had to, and also shooting it wide, long takes, the slow cinema style, made it easier to do that.
Yeah, I mean, when you were getting ready, well, a first question actually, before I forget, did you ever find that actors were resistant? I don't mean the ones that you worked with in the final film, but like in terms of the casting process, did you ever, or even on your other projects, have you run into actors who are kind of resistant about uh, taking on a more experimental type of film, or maybe if it's, more unconventional types of projects? I just wonder if that's something you've ever run into yourself.
Not lately because I've made a bunch of movies and they've played at various places. There's been articles about it. Werewolf itself got written up at Chicago Tribune. That's probably something we want to talk about. Might be useful for filmmakers later in
Sure.
the show. We can talk about that. But no, I haven't received. I didn't receive any heavy obstacles or resistance from actors towards how I wanted to shoot the movie. I explained it to the actors and they were fine with it. And they got to see some of the footage and they were fine with it.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, it seems like everybody really got into the spirit of the film and the characters and everything. So that's good to hear. Um, do you want to talk a little bit? You mentioned the theaters that it played at. Do you want to talk a little bit about your general release strategy with this and even other films, and just how you handle the rollout of a movie?
Sure, yeah. I try to finish a movie and look to see if there's any film festival interest. I've done that on the previous movies, not so much since 2020. Uh, and usually there's some interest depending on the movie. One my documentary about poets, which I just put up on Twitter. not Twitter, on YouTube from 2009. Not poets, about film bloggers. I did a new version of it, a 8 millimeter version. It's on YouTube now called Indie Film Blogger Road Trip. That screened with the Atlanta Film Festival as an online thing. So usually when the movie's done, I don't want to wait too long to start showing it. So I set up a some sort of a theatrical type screening in the real world. Then I get the movie out on Vimeo VOD, and now I'm looking at doing eventive, Blu-ray DVDs, Blu-rays DVDs, more real-world screenings, and also pushing my new movie on YouTube.
Do you see any kind of a window, let's call it like a release window between when you release a film, doing the initial theatrical screenings and when you would make it freely available on YouTube?
Well, things are changing all the time as to what people think will work. But I'm working on a small scale. The Renee movie has seen by 40,000 people on YouTube, at least a part of it, according to YouTube, and that's like the largest number of people who have seen one of my movies ever. So no, I'm experimenting to see which avenues work. But from what I'm hearing now is different people like to watch movies different ways. So unless you're doing a wide release US theatrical, most people are not going to hear about it, all at once. So if you go on Amazon, if you release on Amazon, if you release on YouTube, if you release on Vimeo, some people will hear about it. They'll check it out. Theatrical, some people will hear about it. Festivals, some people will hear about it. So it's uh, from picture to picture or movie to movie, and it depends on what's happening in a given time period. I have no firm strategy as to how to roll out a movie.
You mentioned the Chicago Reader review of
Chicago Tribune.
Tribune, sorry,
Yeah.
of
Reader also reviewed it briefly.
okay. With with that in mind, and I know we talked about this briefly in our previous discussion, but would you like to talk about your promotional process, specifically how you're now, harnessing social media? And like I said, I found you through your blog years ago. Now
Awesome.
with Twitter and everything else, maybe also with like an eye towards how younger filmmakers who are just starting out promoting their work online can think about all of these tools.
Hmm. Yeah, some younger filmmakers that we know have been branded YouTube only filmmakers, and thus, websites and media that are non-YouTube are reluctant to cover them. So the way to get around that is to start doing real world screenings and start promoting those. Maybe do those first before any YouTube releases. Um, no one, I've had screenings where it's just me and a couple other people, and then I've had screenings where it's sold out, right? So no one may show up, or maybe a bunch of people will show up. It doesn't matter. The screenings are right now are for promotional purposes. Set up a screening somewhere, let all the media know, blast it on social media, do ads. Then the websites and media know, even if they don't watch the movie, at least this is a real world movie, not just someone putting a video on YouTube, right? So all most of my press has come from most of my high end press, like Chicago Tribune, New York Times, Chicago Reader. All of that stuff has come through my movies playing at movie theaters. Um, when you are playing a movie at a movie theater, either you or the theater or whatever organization that's releasing the movie will notify the actual media, the real world media, and some of them may be interested in checking out your movie. And you can supplement everything by online media, blogs, social media, ads. So that's my general approach. But ask more questions, and I can think of other things.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a good strategy to kind of cast your net wide and try a lot
Yeah.
of different things, whether it's written blogs, discussions like this, putting trailers out there. Um, This is a question I've been wondering about this, and this is getting a little far afield from Werewolf Ninja Philosopher specifically, but I do want to ask this real quick because I'm curious what you think. So YouTube, obviously, right now, I think is probably the best thing going as far as online video platforms, if you want to put the film out freely, I mean. Do you think do you see a potential danger in putting, to use the expression, putting all your eggs in one basket, putting perhaps too much emphasis on one platform like YouTube? Or do you think there's something to be said for exploring other platforms that offer, free uploads as well?
I think you should look at all possible platforms, free and paid. Like I still have all, Renee and other movies on VOD that people can rent at I think for like $5 for 7 days or so. And you can look at distribution companies, well, distribution companies that are doing streaming themselves. And I think you have a movie on one of those companies.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, you know, lower the risk by being on lots of different places.
Right.
YouTube could shut down. I mean, unlikely, but it's a company run by humans. They could tomorrow say, "Oh, our strategy is changing. No more free videos." So look at what's happening and useful at a given moment, because a lot of websites and distribution companies from even 10 years ago are no longer around.
Yeah.
So
I think it's
so
really
look at
something that,
all the possible options, and YouTube is great for getting a lot of views at the moment. So go with it.
yeah, I was going to say, I think it's something that's really smart about your strategy of doing all these different, the screenings and YouTube, and because again, it's casting your net very widely and potentially reaching audiences that may not follow, one platform or another. So I think you're getting potentially a lot of eyeballs on the film that way that, it's kind of the maximum amount by putting it
Yeah,
out like
the
that.
secret is if a movie is, even if it's not making money, if it's out and people hear about it, everyone is happy. Audiences, the filmmaker, actors, people who've donated money to it, because uh, you know, it creates a situation where the thing that everyone helped to make and release is at least being watched, right? And that can lead to monetization in the future.
Yeah, and as we were saying about the casting of Werewolf and other films, it can also lead to actors, and any collaborators really, I
Yes.
think, feeling confident in coming on board with a project because, people have, understandably busy schedules and a lot of things they might have to pick and choose. But, if they see that you're really out there getting behind these films 100%, pushing them out there, I think it inspires confidence in your collaborators as well. So I think that's been a really great example. Um, let me ask you this: was there anything when you started screening Werewolf? Was there anything that surprised you about the audience reaction? Hopefully positive. Were there moments that got like a laugh that you weren't expecting and that worked well or worked even better than you had anticipated?
I knew that the style was somewhat experimental and super indie, and I
Mhm.
knew a lot of people wouldn't get it. But the people who heard about the movie came to see it. Even from the first screening on, there were some people, or a minority, a small number of people who were super into the movie because of the way it was shot. So that's one way to go. Make your movie incredibly weird, and that'll definitely connect in a big way with some people. And then then you could that's sort of how you start your fan base. Then in in the following movies, you can ease back on the experimental nature and allow in regular filmmaking and script writing norms that will allow more people to connect with the movie, like Werewolf, and then Slow Romance. Slow Romance was kind of weird. Also, the Slow Romance is kind of like just two people talking at a table and with lots of shots of the city, kind of like My Dinner with Andre, another really experimental type movie compared to the mainstream movies. But those two led to Cosmic Disco Renee, which is still weird, but has more of a recognizable sci-fi type plot and has more things going on, so more people are able to connect with that. yeah, some people didn't get it. Some people thought it was terrible. Some critics thought it was terrible. Some audiences thought it was terrible. But some people really dug it. So I focused on people who liked it, and one filmmaker, no, one film critic, Ian Simmons, from Chicago. He really loved it, and he made it one of his favorite movies of 2019 that he saw. That's the year that he saw it in, and we're friends to this day, and we do we discuss movies online still, and do podcasts and stuff. So yeah, some people won't like it, but if you make something unique, some people will like it.
Yeah, and I think it's that, that small, it may be a small portion of the total audience that you connect with, but if you connect with them, they really get into the movie. I think that's a great thing.
And one of my other critic friends, Jamie Toth, uh, I think Werewolf was the first movie of mine that she really got into, and she was, after seeing that, she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm game for anything else he makes because that was such a unique movie."
Do you think that those reactions have kind of emboldened you to take more, even more chances, pushing things even further in future projects?
Sure. I mean, even without those reactions, I would have done. I mean, on my movies, I do exactly what I want to do within the limitations of time, budget, other people's schedules, and all that. But yeah, if if another wacky idea comes up that needs to be executed in the way in the style of Werewolf, in the style of that movie, I would definitely do it, and then I can point that movie towards people who like Werewolf, and they'll probably enjoy it.
Great. This may be a somewhat complicated question to answer, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you see a connection with the films that you were making prior to Werewolf? Do you see, uh, even though they weren't in the slow cinema style, do you see that there were strong elements of those that you were drawing on in making Werewolf? Because I haven't seen your previous film, so I was just curious how you feel that it relates to your body of work prior to that.
The writing has been strong on every movie since even from the first one. There's a couple that are not on YouTube that are on Vimeo that you can rent. Um, and eventually those will probably some version of them will probably make it over to YouTube. But yeah, I see that in the script, character types, dialogue, the writing is connected, similar across all the projects because I don't start filming anything until I feel that the script is there, or we have, in a case that we're improvising, that we have a really good framework and at least some written scenes, so we know, where we can go confidently if we're improvising. So the script probably is the connection.
Okay. And how about the city of New York itself? Do you want to talk a bit about your relationship with the city, how you see it cinematically, what you seek to capture on film when you're filming on location, and also maybe qualities of the city that you didn't necessarily expect to find, but that have shown up in your work.
I was always inspired by New York City made indie films. Jarmusch, Spike Lee, many others, Scorsese, also to a small degree, uh, Jonas Mekas. So when I moved to New York, and even now, I see New York City as sort of a cinematic experience. You've lived here, so you know what I'm talking about. There's
Yeah.
always a billion things going on, busy, interesting visuals, interesting colors and sounds, very cinematic. So I try to capture some of that for my movies when appropriate. Another benefit of setting your movie in New York City is almost anything, almost anything except some super outdoorsy or backwoods kind of thing can happen in New York City. Anything that involves people and buildings. Um, yeah, so that gives you a lot of freedom. I mean, you can have scientists, you can have people who are living off the grid, who just keep to themselves. You can have really retro people. You can have artists. So the city opens up lots of character and story possibilities. Any kind of story, almost any kind of story, can be set here, and it would somewhat be believable.
I got kind of going off of that. I really like how you use the locations of the apartments, for these conversations, kind of these very intimate spaces that contrast with the swirling imagery that we see of the city, where it takes on this almost labyrinthine uh, quality to it with the character, the werewolf moving through it, riding the subway and everything. And then the apartments give it a really nice, contained contrast to that. Do you find when you're writing those sorts of, conversational scenes, do you prefer to set those? I mean, and I'm talking about even aside from any practical production realities, do you find that you like to set those in interior settings?
Yeah, the interior settings come mainly from production limitations and wanting to get really good sound.
Mhm.
Uh, Easier to get good sound in a quiet, controlled environment. Um, so these scenes that I'm thinking about for the next movie, where the conversations take what in transit or outside in the city, I'm going to shoot a safety version of that indoors and also, and I may take the sound from that and lay it over the visuals of the next movie. But if you for any kind of filmmaker working on a micro budget, set your scenes indoors in quiet spaces that you can control, and that way your audio will be really good, even if you're shooting it by yourself, as I did with Slow Romance.
Something else that I really like, a technique that you use that I like, and I've drawn on it myself, so maybe I share your interest in this, is the use of voiceover, or I think in your case you do more like a monologue, typically having a character talking into a voice recorder of some kind. Can you talk a little bit about that process of writing monologues and what draws you to it?
Sure. In Werewolf, we were able to use that method to provide information that uh, was what would have been more clumsy to provide through dialogue between a number of characters. And we didn't really, no, we used that a little bit in Slow Romance, but Slow Romance was designed as two people, as a movie where it's just two people talking for the most part. I used that in Renee movie a lot, and for Renee and Slow Romance, the idea came from Werewolf because it worked well on Werewolf. It's a way to provide additional informational, additional context, interior information that the character may not share with other people in conversations. So yeah, I find that to be useful, and I plan on using that technique whenever necessary. And it's shown up in lots of other movies also. If you see Woody Allen's Manhattan, there are a number of scenes where he's talking into some kind of a tape recorder. I think that whole process, writers use that and have used it for a long time. So that's moved over to film, and I found it useful for Werewolf.
Yeah, it's a great way to get you directly into the mindset of the character and really kind of bring you close to their thought process. By coincidence, I just realized that the first movie that I really used that technique on was actually a short film called The Wolfman in New York
Nice.
back in 2010. It was part of a series called the Micro Movies that a screenwriter, Lloyd Fonvier, had come up with as a way of exploring short form narrative storytelling through web video. At that time, he was thinking in terms of it moving from the short viral video that was common on YouTube, moving from that type of thing into how can we use short form video to tell a story. And his idea very much revolved around using a written monologue that would be put over um, uh, action and images filmed around New York. There was also a series that was done as part of that called Noir Bars, where it was a series of kind of film noir, ultra short film noir stories filmed in bars all over New York and Brooklyn. So
Awesome.
anyway, I just thought that was a funny coincidence. That was the film that where I really started to use that technique for the first time, and I've it served me well on a lot of shorts and now with features. So yeah, I definitely respond to that element in your movies. I like those scenes, and I think it really helps that in Werewolf they're engaging monologues. I mean, they are in your other films too, but I just mean they work well in Werewolf, and yeah, it's a good technique. Is there any other
Yes,
thing, any other
Art
techniques that
Shryan
you?
go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Art Shryan did a good job with those monologues. Good
Yeah.
actor. One thing that's kind of distantly related is because we have to be on the social media platforms to promote movies, filmmakers should really use those platforms to talk with other filmmakers, right? If you follow, if you find a filmmaker on Twitter, follow them, like their stuff, if you like their stuff, indicate that you like them and message them, talk to them about things because I think a lot of filmmakers don't talk enough. They're trying to guess everything, how the industry works, how filmmaking works, how promo works. All that guessing is not necessary. Just, message your fellow filmmakers and ask a bunch of questions. They'll get back to you if they feel like it and or if they have time. For the most part, filmmakers, if they have the time, are open to talking to other filmmakers. I mean, I've had to block some filmmakers because this one filmmaker was like, "Hey, can you get my movie into this? When can you get my movie into this theater?" I'm like, "Listen, I'm busy. Just submit it, do your thing. Don't ask me to do stuff for you. Ask that's like the only discussion we were having, right?
Right.
So, ultimately, I blocked him because he was bugging me too much. Uh, but he could still email me and we could talk. But the point is, yeah, if you're normal about the contact, that's fine. Just people will get back to you when they can, and just develop, communicate and develop actual, friendships with filmmakers, and it's an enormous, enormous help. So whatever production or distribution challenge you come across, you can just check with other filmmakers.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I'm glad you bring it up because I think it's something we both feel very strongly about is spreading the word about films, supporting filmmakers as much as possible, whether that's even if it's just through, sharing the social media links just to help to get the word out there. I think every little bit helps. And I know I really appreciate that when when you or anyone does that with any of my films. And I always try to do that for others and to make myself as accessible as possible. That's something I'm increasingly trying to get onto more social media platforms, put my contact information out there. I encourage people to reach out to me. Just let's talk. Even like these interviews, I say, if you want to have a conversation, great. Let's have it on, have the conversation on camera and put it out there so it can be something that can live to help promote your movie.
Good
I
idea,
agree.
good approach.
Yeah. Do you what are the pitfalls, let's say, that you see, um, filmmakers really of any age, I mean, young or older, falling into with social media that maybe they could avoid, maybe things that might end up being more distractions than being something really productive for them. Is there anything that you would suggest kind of watching out for?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, if you're a filmmaker, the main goal of your online existence should be to make and promote your movies and the distribution of them. So you don't want to have Twitter become your main art form, or making I mean, making vlogs on YouTube becoming your main thing is fine as long as that's tied to the fiction or documentary films that you're making.
Mhm.
Basically, everything else, the day jobs, fundraising, family stuff. Uh, like I visited my dad in Maryland, and we did a little, you and I did a little interview.
Yeah,
Everything should be tied to filmmaking and distribution, one way or another. That way. Hold on, I'm being distracted. Can you close that door? Okay, go. Okay, sorry.
that's right. Yeah, I think.
Anyway, so things should be connected to the actual film stuff. So, oh, what I was going to say, keep things positive. I mean, if you're, no one wants to hear that you're having a hard time with your movie. A little bit of that is okay, but I think keep it maybe 80% positive and 20% negative, at least, at the worst, because the main thing you're offering the audience or the public is not, I mean, unless you make a movie about this, the main thing you're offering is not how much you're suffering as an artist. The main thing is the actual art or the entertainment.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good outlook to take with it because it can be useful to talk about the challenges that we face, but I think to do it in a productive way, rather than to dwell on it, but rather to offer potential solutions or sometimes just as a reminder to, keep making the movies, even when it does get difficult. But I agree that to have a positive outlook, I think does certainly does ourselves and hopefully anybody reading a lot of good. Um,
And also, yeah, don't get stuck with one type of social media. Don't get stuck with one type of release. YouTube releases right now are in. They're working for some filmmakers, but you know, we're filmmakers first, and people who use various platforms second. So, those platforms don't have a special love for our films beyond the fact that they work for both parties right now. That could easily change. So think of yourself as a filmmaker first who uses whatever methods and distribution avenues available. One other thing, yeah, I mean, it's best to use as many as possible and have your film available in many different ways, even if it's only being watched on YouTube. Having the other options as backup is really good, and it'll make you feel more confident about the entire process. It'll make you feel more confident about using YouTube itself.
yeah, it's a good point, and I think it gives us a good perspective to remember that, like I said, we're filmmakers first, and I know this is true for both of us that we were making movies long before YouTube was around,
Right?
and we may be making movies long after YouTube is gone. I mean, you never
For
know
sure.
what could happen. So you have to be adaptable. You really do have to always be sensitive to these things. Where these different trends are going. At the same time, I think, like you said, it's good to keep the work on many different platforms, not necessarily just going to chase the latest thing, but to be aware of it and see how you can use it to your benefit. On that note, are there any particular, so let's say, social media platforms right now that you see that you're excited by that might come up as a good alternative for filmmakers to keep an eye on?
Um, Twitter is always problematic with after Elon took it over, but a lot of people still use it. Still one of the most widely used social media platforms. Facebook, so I'm on there a lot because a bunch of filmmakers and a bunch of film critics are on there, and a bunch of film venues are on there. Facebook is good. YouTube is good. YouTube has even a text, page called Community. You can start writing stuff there just like you do on Twitter. Weebly is good for websites. Squarespace is good for websites. Email is good. Start creating an email list. Check out filmmaker Amir Matla's website. It's really good. He has he collects emails there. He has all his movies, history of his filmmaking career. I think it's amirmatla.com. Links should be on my Twitter, which is at Sujewa Fantastic. TikTok I haven't really messed with, but Aaliyah, I think the actress from several of my movies, uses TikTok, and she just did a promo post for the movie. Yeah, I use primarily Twitter and YouTube with Facebook as backup and these days, but I'm open to looking at everything else.
I think you make a really good point about websites, and I think indie filmmakers, should not underestimate the value of having a standalone website because I think it's easy with social media, Twitter especially, because you're always getting all this information. I think sometimes it can feel a lot more current to
Mhm.
us than it really is because it's also very fleeting and it's gone. That information is gone and buried under an avalanche of tweets within, minutes. So having a standalone website that people can come back to. I mean, I know I will often look up filmmakers' work through a website. I'll just do a quick Google search and see if I can find the standalone website. And in many ways, I like to start there
Mhm.
because if it's somebody I'm interested in, I want to follow their work, then I'll go look them up on Twitter or whatever. And also, you
Yeah,
mentioned,
let me just add, for the
sure.
media, if you want traditional media coverage, you should have a website with all your essential info, all your work, your thoughts on the work, how they can contact you, everything in one place, images, downloadable stills, press packets, because those guys are often on deadline and are often working on multiple projects. I've had situations where I was showing a movie in New York and New York Times didn't get to, starting to write about the movies like until like 8 days prior to the opening, right? So
Mhm.
if all my stuff wasn't already on one website, then I'd be scrambling to get stuff together. And people need information in depth to write articles. So have a website and document everything that you do that's related to your film work in one place. Then social media can be ways to promote different aspects of stuff on that site.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the publicity stills because that's something I wonder sometimes how many filmmakers think of that, especially if you're just putting the movies directly to YouTube. Because if they end up having a life off of YouTube, like you said, a review, or if you end up getting a screening set up, sometimes like festivals, theaters, I mean, they want that material as well, so it serves a lot of purposes. And I would say that aside from having the downloadable stills, even you could do like a Dropbox link and
Right.
have that link to their website or whatever. And I even recently, I don't know how much traction this would get, or how much it'll really add, but I actually tried putting all the publicity stills for my last couple films up onto Pinterest. I thought it's one
Nice.
more place that they can live, and I imagine there might be people looking movie related. You never know how people are going to find things and how one search might lead to another. So I figured, well, it's one more place. I've got all these existing stills and frame grabs that I took from the movie. Why not just upload them, and they can live there, and maybe somebody will find it. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's good to kind of,
and two
yeah, go ahead.
two related items really fast.
Sure.
Um, do crowdfunding projects even if you know you're not going to make the money. Uh, you'll be forced to get everything organized and promote and practice promoting a certain project, and that'll be proof that the project is coming or is in existence. And the second thing is Patreon. Yeah, set up your Patreon, follow other filmmakers, donate $1 or whatever, they'll follow back. That could be a good way to monetize down the road. Crowdfunding and Patreon are still useful, even if only for getting you motivated to get those pages done, which then gathers all the information in one place, which can be used for publicity.
Yeah, that's the thing. It gets you comfortable with promoting yourself and your work, and thinking about all of these issues that we're discussing, right here now. Um, how do you feel about the in terms of promotion? Do you see value in setting up individual pages for each film? Is that I believe you've done that through Twitter. I was wondering if you could speak to the advantage you see of having, like a standalone website, a standalone Twitter account, etc., for each film.
I think more individual pages you have, I mean, it becomes a chore to manage them all, but more, the larger the number of pages you have, the better it is. Because if it's like a blog for every film, let's say, right? And let's say you have 10 films over time. Let's say you do 100 blog posts over time for each film. So now you're talking about 1,000 pages, and you can do advertising, affiliate links, and other advertising on each one of those pages. So that's 1,000 pages that could, for example, when you release your 11th movie and it's on YouTube and no one knows about it, you can put links from those previous 1,000 pages going to that YouTube video. And YouTube will see that. And I imagine this is roughly how it works. YouTube will see that, then they'll see, oh, some of these links are coming from a blog that's 10 years old, and a million people have, or let's even say 100,000 people have read this blog. So Google, YouTube is Google essentially. So Google knows how to figure out who visited a certain blog. So once YouTube sees a link coming from an old blog, YouTube will figure out, oh, these people who read this blog might be interested in this movie. So then they start showing it to those people to see if their guess is correct. How YouTube appears to work is that they want to show movies to videos to people who might like them, right?
Hmm.
So that works for YouTube, that works for advertisers, that works for the creators, and the videos get likes and views. They don't want to show movies to tons of people who have no interest in those movies. So if you're an unknown filmmaker, like most filmmakers that we know, relatively unknown, how will YouTube figure out who to show this stuff to? You need links coming in from lots of other sites that help YouTube figure out, oh, this is the kind of movie that this video is, or these are the kind of people who might like this video. So all that other stuff, all that other web promo stuff can tie into YouTube or any platform that you release the movie on.
I wanted to mention before, just before I forget, that speaking of social media platforms, one of the advantages to having a presence on multiple sites, and I will say especially Facebook, I think, is that we shouldn't forget there are many filmmakers who may only be on
Right,
one particular site. So you could be missing out on updates from a really interesting filmmaker just because you're not using Facebook or whatever.
right.
I wanted to just mention that pointer before I forgot. But to
Good point.
return to your point about how to harness the power of all these different blog pages and links, linking to YouTube and everything. As much as I try not to get hooked onto worrying about like the algorithms and numbers and everything. There are ways of I mean, you do have to think about these things to some extent because you want to put the work out there in such a way that it can be found, if it's using, I mean, down to like using hashtags on Instagram or whatever. I mean, whatever basic thing you can do just to help people find it. And I think that's really the point that we're making in all of this is it's about
Right.
getting the information out there. That's really what this all boils down to.
Yeah, thanks to the web, we have a great tool. We
Yeah.
can create lots of pages for our movies on social, web, regular websites, and then now we can get them out on YouTube to get a lot of views, and then we can use the other web pages to let YouTube know, this is the kind of people who might like this movie. Then we can, from the YouTube video, we can send people to our site for our sites for mailing list monetization, Patreon, donations, whatever. So yeah, the web offers a ton of tools now that weren't even available 5 years ago or even 10 years ago for indie
Yeah.
film.
Yeah. Something I also would say is as long as you're comfortable with it, to make it as easy as possible for people to not just to find you, but also to be able to contact you. And that's why I've taken to publishing my email address now in the bios of any of the the low budget vision stuff pages. People because I want people to contact me. I think a lot of filmmakers. Well, I don't want to I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I'll say for myself. And it seems like you've said this as well that you enjoy hearing from
Right,
viewers and as long as people aren't abusive about it and
right.
it's great to hear from people and
Oh,
uh
and
yeah.
related,
Mhm.
the negative side, feel free to block people and mute people who are, not behaving properly on social media or towards you. There's 8 billion people. You're not going to run out of people to connect with.
Yeah, yeah, there that's the thing. It's getting back to your point about keeping a positive outlook. Sometimes there are those people out there who kind of it can kind of drag you down if they're being overly critical or whatever. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good point. But yeah, I try to really keep the door open, for anybody who wants to just come and talk to me about the movies they're working on, or let me know about a project, or and hopefully this interview series is going to be one more way of getting the word out there.
And
Yeah.
one thing to remember is that 90s Hollywood is over. that
Hmm.
most movies are made by indie filmmakers and production companies now. Most of the distribution is happening online, and theatrical is useful for some movies, but it's expensive, and everyone loses money on theatrical. But it's a good way to promote the VOD. So you really have to look at what is happening at the present in a given time period, because people are still thinking about the 80s and 90s, and those days are like 30, 40 years ago. That's an enormous amount of time. you know Entire generations of people have come into being, and different ways of consumption, production, different norms have come into being. Like, just to make it clear, 1960s, the relationship 1920s have to 1960s, just time wise, is what the 1980s has to the present, which is 2024, 40 years. So just imagine the tech and the norms of 1920s versus attitudes, tech, and norms of the 1960s. Same thing, 2024 is not 84, not 94. That's not even 2004. I mean, so much amazing tech developments and web developments have happened since then. Filmmakers now really have to look at what's happening now and adapt to the present environment.
Good point. I have to constantly remind myself that the 80s wasn't just 20 years ago anymore.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, that whole model. I imagine this was probably even more the case for you than me. I was pretty young at the time in the 90s, but I know for me, the indie film, the kind of the mythos of the Kevin Smiths and the Quentin Tarantinos of the world, that loomed very large for me and very much informed my expectations up to a
Mine
point.
too.
Yeah, and when I realized like that just wasn't the case anymore, I had to really rethink how I approached all of it, and because that by even the 2000s, that
That
model,
was over.
yeah,
Yeah.
and of course
Yeah.
it
And
was
a
only
lot
a
of,
lucky few at the time who benefited from it anyway, really.
yeah, I mean, real indie film is just starting to happen. It was theoretical and it was a vision in the 80s and 90s. Now, 2024, anyone who wants to do it can watch YouTube videos, figure out how to shoot, write, edit, do everything, make their first 1 to 10 features, get them out on YouTube, improve, and then start making work that uh, might have a wide appeal. And you can, if you make it to any level on any social media platform, and you make more interesting work, you can use that and help and use that to help develop a fan base.
To kind of tie this back to Werewolf and to talking about that film specifically, I think there's a really good thing to remember here, which is that even though a film may be old to us, even if it's a film we made, 5, 6, 7 years ago or whatever, it's still going to be new to somebody.
Right.
So
Lots of people,
yeah,
to the
yeah,
vast majority of the human population.
that's true. So, don't underestimate the continued, the sustainability of keeping these films out there, of introducing them to new audiences all the time. And I mean, Sujewa, just doing what you're doing with this, coming on here tonight and talking about it. And I'm sure somebody seeing this video will have never heard of the film before and will hopefully be motivated to go check it out. And of course, once this is published, I am going to put a link to the film along with your
Awesome.
other sites in the description of this video. So I encourage anybody who has gotten any value out of what we had to say tonight to please go check out Sujewa's uh, website, YouTube channel, follow the thoughts on Twitter, which I think are very inspiring and very useful. And
And
yeah,
subscribe and like and comment on Matt's video and on videos on my YouTube. Helps a lot.
indeed. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add about Werewolf tonight? And if not, are there any either upcoming screenings or projects you'd like to plug? And finally, after that, just to remind people where they can find you.
Sure. Werewolf. Everyone who has not seen it and want a weird noir indie comedy, absurd comedy, it's on YouTube. Just search Werewolf Ninja Philosopher and the movie will come up. My stuff can be found, just under my name, and Werewolf Ninja Philosopher will take you to my channel. And my new movie, Cosmic Disco Detective Renee, is on there. Check it out. Comment, like, subscribe, always helps. At Sujewa Fantastic for Twitter, and I'm working on a new movie called 53 Cases. I hope to get that out by late May, so I'll let you know. It'll come out on YouTube eventually, and VOD, Vimeo probably before that. I'm trying to get my Patreon page up and running, so I'll post links on Twitter, and people can follow, donate if they want, get early access. I'm showing a very weird movie called another weird movie called Man Baby on April 20th at Film Noir Cinema. My Twitter has the info. I share that info daily. So anyone in Brooklyn, come to that event. We'll meet. The filmmakers will meet before, and we'll watch the movie, and we'll hang out afterwards. Check out all of Matt's stuff. I have a lot of Matt movies to watch, and we can talk about them in the future. I think that's it. I have a website, nycfantastic.com, that needs to be updated. And one thing to remember, if you're a filmmaker who's self-distributing, you're going to be behind on lots of things forever. Updating sites, fundraising, debt, promotions, special projects. That's fine. That's just the norm. Just make a list, put some work in every day, and see what you can get done every week. After a number of years, you'll be somewhat caught up on things, or at least you'll have a system where you're keeping things going and new movies are getting done and out. So the you know commit to being an indie filmmaker and getting everything that you need to get done. Don't worry too much about specific outcomes like being rich or famous in a specific kind of way in a specific time frame. The long-term thing is to enjoy being an artist, do the necessary work, and make the movies and get them out.
Thank you, Sujuyo. I'm sure I'll have you back on here sooner than later because we've got lots more
Awesome.
films to talk about. Your upcoming project, we can certainly discuss that when that's released,
Sure.
and anything else
And,
you've
we,
got going on. So,
and we'll talk
yes,
about the next movie, Slow Romance, and Renee movie in upcoming discussions.
sounds good. All right. Well, thanks again for joining me tonight for this. It was, as always, a pleasure talking with you. And
And one more thing, we
yeah,
should look
sure.
at doing showing 2 of our movies in Baltimore and also in Brooklyn. Joint projects.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You got the what is it, April 20th screening
Yes.
coming up, right? Yeah, and I've got May 2nd. I've got the Cinema Detective. It's going to be at Normal's Books and Records here in
Awesome.
Baltimore.
Send me a screener link and I'll promote it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be sure to do that.
Okay, great.
All right. Good talking with you, and thanks again.
Good. When this comes out, I'll promote it. Talk to you soon.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot.